All right. So I'm not sure if this is the first interview you've done since the subcommittee hearing of the Twitter files. Have you done one already?
I've done a few,
Okay.
not a lot, but it's there's been a lot of travel, and I'm also doing a new thread that's probably going to come out tomorrow. So those are very time consuming.
Oh,
So
gosh.
yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, we all saw the subcommittee hearing and the way that you were treated by particularly the Democrat politicians. And I'm curious to hear from you. How did that make you feel? And did you expect to be treated that way?
Um, I mean, I think as I said in the hearings, I I spent a long time overseas, in Russia, and I knew reporters who really suffered, who were beaten up, hit with crowbars, and even a couple who were murdered.
Oh my
So being picked on in a congressional hearing, on the scale of things that can happen to you isn't so bad. I think it was embarrassing. I was expecting to be attacked, but I think the way they behaved, and the nature of the attacks was kind of insulting, and showed the total lack of interest in the subject matter, which was a little bit shocking to me, I think.
I think so too. Do you think if, let's say it was the other way around, and let's say that the information that was reported by the Twitter files was more, I guess, critical about the left, so to speak. Like most of the information that was discovered was against the left in reference to censorship. Do you think that the Democrat politicians on that committee would have been a little bit more tolerant, so to speak?
Well, honestly, I think if you read the Twitter files, the overwhelming majority of the stuff that we're writing about isn't really about one party or the other. Um, Most of it is about the intelligence services, and if you look at the focus of a lot of these lists that they were giving to Twitter, they're all over the place. They target people on both the left and the right. One person that I talked to described it as counterterrorism to counterpopulism. So it's really very dependent upon what country you're looking at. In the United States, they're more worried about uh, Trump supporters because the populist right is more of a threat, I think, to the authorities. But in Europe, Africa, South America, these groups are, the anti-disinformation groups are looking more at the left. So I do find the lack of interest in this a little bit puzzling on the part of the Democrats, because, well, I guess really not, because it's the real left that's being targeted, right? Not the Democratic Party left. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I obviously, if there were emails about Donald Trump behaving badly, that probably even a couple of those, that would dominate the story, I think.
That's right. This is a big part of partisan politics. So there was a congresswoman. I believe she's actually a delegate. From what I understand, she can't really vote, so to speak. Congresswoman Plaskett, and she continued to ask you, who gave you access to these emails. I saw that the video that Worf made. It was really funny. But can you explain to people? I know you did explain to them that you cannot reveal, the identity of your source. Can you explain to everyone why that is incredibly important, why you can't reveal that type of information, just as a journalist in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit embarrassing because this isn't one of those situations where you have a source who's like at the front lines of a war, whose life is at stake. It's not exactly a Sherlock Holmes mystery what's going on with this story. But as a reporter, I made an arrangement with a source, actually sources. The attribution for the Twitter files stories is sources at Twitter, and it's not my arrangement to break. This is just sort of basic journalistic ethics 101. If I wanted to break it, I'd have to call the people in the middle of the hearing and say, "Can I do this?" But even that is very questionable. Like, a government official should never be asking somebody to break their deal, especially where it's irrelevant here. Like, the only reason you would want to legitimate reason you'd want to know what somebody's source is, would be to try to determine whether the story is more or less accurate. But here you're looking at documents, so that's not really an issue. I think honestly, people like Delegate Plaskett and Sylvia Garcia, the congresswoman from Texas, I think they just don't know that it's not cool to go there with a reporter. I mean, if I were to answer that question, it would be setting a very bad precedent for other reporters. No matter how silly people think it is, it would be very bad to do that. And they were totally out of line going there and didn't really know it.
Were you surprised that it appears that some of them actually didn't do their research? For example, I know Congresswoman Plaskett said so-called journalists. Garcia obviously didn't know what Substack was. Like, it was kind of revealing to me. I was like, did they do any research to prep for this hearing? Was that surprising to you?
A little bit. I mean, I've covered Congress enough to know kind of how this works. The members of Congress have a tough job. Most of the time they're flying in for really 3 days a week. They come in on Tuesday, they leave on Thursday, and they go from hearing to hearing. And aides hand them cheat sheets, and they don't really have time to read all the material most of the time. So, in some cases that's more important than others. But actually, this is sort of an interesting question, because one of the reasons that Twitter, Facebook, and Google they were originally dragged to the Hill in 2017, and the Senate Select Intelligence Committee had to invite all these outside experts like New Knowledge and Graphica and Johns Hopkins in, is because the members didn't know how to talk to tech people. They didn't understand how tech worked. They didn't know what a post was or how things went viral. So they had to hire experts to tell them about this. But they were the same people that they were interviewing in these hearings, which made it kind of a feedback loop. And that's kind of what you saw on display in this hearing. Like, Congresswoman Garcia is asking me, she seemed not to understand that Twitter was something that you just post to. Like, she thought it was like an editorial office that I had to send copy to. And there was a moment where she asked me, did you attribute, but you just said you have to attribute all your sources to Twitter. And you can see that I paused, because I literally don't know what she's trying to say in that moment. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think the members don't really understand this world very well. And as a result, you get a lot of totally incoherent testimony.
Did you know who the committee members were going to be before you arrived, or did you find out when you got there?
No, I knew. I mean, you can see who's on the subcommittee. Unfortunately, I didn't do as much homework as I should have, because in the moment, especially when I was talking to Dan Goldman from New York, when he asked me that question about do you or do you not agree with a pair of indictments? I had forgotten that he was a U.S. attorney, and so for him to ask a person whether or not you would agree with an indictment, a lawyer should never ask that question. So I should have said that. But I didn't know who was going to be on the committee. Yeah.
That's interesting. I was kind of surprised to see Debbie Weiserman Schultz on that committee, because it was kind of laughable to me. And I just thought to myself, like, I sincerely hope she's not trying to question anyone's integrity, giving her former past with the DNC. So I was kind of surprised to see her on that committee. But I think that both you and Michael handled it very well, because from what I saw, like, both of you seem pretty calm and patient. I know, like, for me, I listened to it first and then I watched it later on. And as I was listening to it, I was like, there's no way I could sit through this. I would just have to, like, get up and say, this line of questioning is ridiculous, because I felt like they would ask you a question, and then when you would try to answer the question, they would speak over you.
Yeah, I had been warned about that look, they're going to reclaim their time. They're not going to let you say anything but yes or no. And so I knew that was coming. But until you're actually there and you see the cameras rolling, and every second feels like a very pregnant pause and all that. It's disconcerting when people don't let you answer a question, and it was upsetting, you know, at times. You know, the whole business about you know, did you make money from this? I actually should have gotten angrier about that, because I got caught up in whether or not that was true, and didn't think about the bigger picture, which is that you have no right to ask me whether or not I'm making money on this. Like, it's totally legitimate for a journalist to make money, and you wouldn't ask that question of you know, someone from the New York Times, like, or you know, the Washington Post. Did you get a book deal out of this? Like, they would never ask you that. So I think I fumbled that part of it. And but yeah, no, I mean, look, there was another hearing of this same subcommittee that wasn't televised about a week before this, with FBI whistleblowers, where they basically did exactly the same thing to the witnesses. They asked them about money, they asked them about their motives, they asked them, you know, who their sources were. It's the same playbook. They're just trying to smear you every time.
Wow. Do you think looking back on it, because it seemed like they do have some type of resentment towards Elon Musk because of like the Twitter files and just him like purchasing Twitter to begin with, do you think they're going to ask Elon Musk to testify?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I don't know that they would. I think that's a situation where both parties would probably. Well, I think Elon would probably do it, actually, now that I think about it. But they would. There are probably too many unknowns in that equation for them. Clearly, I think it's hard to really put into words how much Elon buying Twitter upset the apple cart of this thing that had been built. Before he arrived, the government and all these NGOs, a lot of them are state funded, and agencies like DHS, CISA, the Global Engagement Center, and all the tech companies, all the major ones, had agreed essentially on a cross-platform censorship arrangement that, among other things, involved a sort of hidden subsidy for certain kinds of NGOs, where some of the bigger ones are given free access to fire hose data for all of these platforms. So when Elon Musk showed up and he is sort of opting out of this system and also potentially threatening to turn off this free access to data, it really screwed up the whole thing. And that's an undercurrent to all of this that probably needs to be explained at some point, that just by virtue of not going along in the same way the other companies have, you know, he's sort of upset something that has been in motion for 5 or 6 years now.